with Lou May, and we're talking about some moments in history or parts of history in Marblehead that I think some of us didn't know any about. I'm speaking for me. I can tell you much of what Lou is telling us, I didn't know really much about at all. And I know the next story we wanted to talk about is about a woman named Agnes. And I guess I keep referring to her as just Agnes, Lou, and I don't even know if she has a last name, which I think is tragic by itself. But tell us more about Agnes.
Thank you for recognizing that, because we only know this lady by that single name, Agnes. That is an indicator of the times and how people of color existed. Agnes lived in Marblehead in the late 1600s and early 1700s. She was enslaved, and she had come from Africa, and the family who enslaved her was the family of Samuel Russell, prominent people in town. When Samuel Russell Sr. Passed away in the early 1700s, we see Agnes first in his will. And this is available. The probate estate documents are available online through the Massachusetts, I'm forgetting the exact
Deeds, I think.
Historical, the big private American Ancestry.com, I think is the name of the website. But we can find Samuel Russell Sr.'s probate materials where this lady is listed as property and willed to his son, Samuel Russell Jr. Now, other research later tells us that Agnes was primarily toiling with the lady of the house in the Russell family. But at the time, think of this as well, women meant nothing in terms of any kind of rights to ownership. And so the enslaved person was not willed to the wife. The enslaved person was willed to Samuel Russell Jr. Now, the thing that caused Marblehead Racial Justice Team to be very focused on this is that the Russell family is written up in a number of books. The Russell family, in the way it's written, thought highly enough of Agnes that when she died in 1718, they wanted her interred, her remains, in Old Burial Hill, in their in proximity to where the other members of their family were buried. And this was very unusual. And to our knowledge at the Marblehead Racial Justice Team, this is the only person of color who is interred at Old Burial Hill who was an enslaved person in that period when people were being buried at Old Burial Hill. Recall that Old Burial Hill was so-called filled pretty early in the 1700s.
So let's wait a minute. Let's pause on that for a moment, because that's a pretty substantial piece of information. So this Russell family, sort of in the day, did something very different.
Yes.
They chose that this person, Agnes, who I guess was viewed as property because they were willing her, but they saw her differently. Is that fair to say? And they wanted her in their tomb or in their plot.
Area. But now it gets more fascinating. Speaking of them doing things differently, Reverend Andy Stossel of St. Michael's Episcopal Church had a conversation with Reverend Jim Bixby at Lutheran Lutheran, of our co-chair of our Marblehead Racial Justice Team. And Reverend Andy was able to say to Jim, geez, come on over to St. Michael's and I can tell you some more about Agnes. The Russell family allowed her or encouraged her, whatever the term would be, to actually get Christian baptism. at St. Michael's Church.
And was
So
that unusual in the day?
known as a baptized Christian not long before her death. I am thinking that it may have been 1714 or so. Don't hold me to that, but sometime as an adult, Agnes actually received baptism at St. Michael's and is shown in the St. Michael's records from that early era. So that was another way that this family, the Russells, behave differently in the way that you said, because there weren't many of the enslaved people who were baptized. There were some, and those are recorded in the records of another church that was around in that period of enslavement, the second church on Mugford Street, now the Unitarian Church. But this one at St. Michael's was certainly one of the earliest ones, not long after St. Michael's itself was founded. So that's another way it was different.
So that was unusual to have a slave who you were encouraging to be baptized as a Christian.
No doubt about it, Bob.
So, so the Russells were really sort of ahead of their time in a lot of these areas, one could say. Would that be fair to say?
Well,
Maybe,
they still, kept
yeah,
the person in slavery.
right.
And we have to look a little bit more, I think, before we would characterize them as ahead of their time. But in these aspects of having this lady interred at Old Burial Hill, and that they worked with St. Michael's to get her baptized, those were certainly two illustrious things.
And
Now,
do we know where her grave is, Lou?
we absolutely know where the remains of Agnes lie in Old Burial Hill, in a very prominent spot, not far from the gazebo and not far from the memorial to the seamen lost in one of the 19th century gales. But here is something Marbury Racial Justice Team is very focused on. There was a rash of vandalism at Old Burial Hill in the 1970s. So this gravestone of Agnes existed from 1718 into the 1970s. And we have photographs from the late 19th century showing it in decent condition. But in the 1970s, it was vandalized and disappeared.
Oh, it's gone completely.
Gone completely. But in some circumstance, and this is something we sure can use some additional research work on, there is now in the ground at that spot in Old Burial Hill a small modern granite slab about 12 inches by 18 inches that depicts this lady's burial site. It's not good. It's got to come out. We're working with the Seminary Commission about that because it's got erroneous information about her date of death. And it also is not very respectable in describing her. But anyway, yes, we know precisely, and we in the Marbury Racial Justice Team regularly sort of make visits there to the gravesite of Agnes to pay our respects. So we absolutely know that. It's very easy to find. The area now is pretty open, right there in the vicinity of the gazebo. And this is written up very precisely, as is the text. Again, we have photos, so we don't need that text. But there was a book by a man named Frank Bessem about Old Burial Hill. I'm forgetting, I think 1914 is when that was published. But Frank Bessem describes the exact location of where Agnes's remains are interred and gives the text of what the gravestone said. So we've got really good information about this. We're very eager to get going on a replacement of that gravestone. We've had very positive reaction from Chris Johnston at the Town Historical Commission. We've begun discussions with the Cemetery Commission. So we thank everybody who has collaborated with us on this so far. We've got a number of people who have made pledges to aid our funding of the new gravestone. And this is one of the things we're looking to move forward on.
Well, that's exciting. And you know, once again, you've given us enough information to make it, you know, I'm going to find myself driving up to take a look and see if I can find Agnes's grave at some point this week. So I think it's fascinating information, and hopefully people watching this will be spurred to go find out a little bit more, which I think would be great. So thanks, Lou, for all that great information on Agnes.